Hi, this is Spencer Hiko Martin.
Okay, it's another episode of Reflections, and I'm here with Pimp currently still from Team Liquid, which might surprise some people, but you're still on a contract with them, right? No current plans to move any elsewhere?
Still on a contract, yeah.
Okay, so one of the interesting things about this interview is I've obviously known you quite a while throughout CSGO, and you are a player where a lot of more modern fans might not know this because they only can remember the biggest, they only know like NIP at the beginning of CSGO, or maybe some of them know like, Shox was in Very Games or something, but you can understand why a fan who came along in 2015 or 2016, they're not going to know the early parts of CSGO, but you were there from basically the very beginning. Like you were playing some of the first tournaments, and before that, you played a little bit of Source. So I'll point out at the beginning of this interview, I actually did a pretty in-depth text interview with you. I looked it up. It's going to be in the description box here. It was in like March of 2014. So obviously there's a lot that we didn't cover in that, but it goes pretty in-depth on like the Western Wolves era, like all the different tournaments you went to. So if people want to read like really, really in-depth, you can go and read that. But since there are a lot of new fans, and we also know what gamers are like, for whatever reason they don't like to read, we will go over some of that now as well, because I think maybe your perspective will be different as 3 years later. So my first question is this, okay? In the written interview, I asked you about what you were actually like as a Source player. You notice that's quite a common question I have because I didn't follow Source myself, so I can't know like who was like a legit rising talent and who was actually like a good player, So I noticed your answer for that was like a fairly generic one, because he kind of said like, you thought you were a good player, but you didn't really get a chance to shine. And, so as a result, you didn't really do much in Source. But I do have a question that's a different one, okay, which is, even in Source, you played with MSL, who would go on to be a teammate of yours in Western Wolves early on, and who you've both had, like, at times, troubled periods in your career where you weren't on top teams and you've been just kicking around different teams. So instead, I want to ask this. What was MSL actually like in Source? Like, was he any good? Because obviously, think about what his current status is, Pimp. Everyone thinks he's fucking terrible. They think he's a great in-game. They do that horrible thing where they go, you've got an amazing mind. You're terrible at the game, though. So what was he actually like as a Source player, MSL? Give us some thoughts.
Yeah, well, I've been playing with MSL, as you said, like pretty much my whole career, ever since I started playing Counter-Strike Source and like figured out there was a competitive scene. MSL was always like my go-to guy, and me, him, and Nil, the now VAC player, I guess you could call him. Yeah, we were always like a trio, and we stuck together for 2 or 3 years. When I got good enough in Source to actually play with them, because they were better than me in the beginning, ever since we were pretty much the trio, and we stuck together. In terms of like MSL, he was just as myself. Like we were very young back then, and I'd say like we were very immature in many ways. We acted out, and we were not very liked on the Source scene either. Not necessarily to be like now, I don't think so, but it was not that bad. But we were like very immature, and we were acting out a lot. So there was a lot of like players and especially older guys who didn't necessarily like our, like, I don't know what to call, like we were very young and we acted very young. So there has always been like, I wouldn't say a problem, but there's always been like a characteristic of me, MSL, and Nil for that matter. As a player in Source, he was better than me in the beginning for sure, and he was a great player. He was not in-game leading. He was just always like this second guy. He was like supposed to be a fragger, and as I remember it back then, like in Source, you never really talked about roles and like I'm the support, I'm the fragger. Like that's, to me, that's like that's new. That's something you begun to do in like 2014 or something when it really got serious. It's something that, to me at least, has been hyped up for quite a while. Back then we just played and we had spots and he played them great. He was a great player, and he was never like in particular like that good. He was never like considered to join one of the best teams in Source. He was always like just like very consistent, being on the 3rd or 4th best team in Denmark. And back then that was good, because we had teams like DS Rec and like Glaive was playing with some of the guys back then, were the best Counter-Strike Source teams in Denmark. And obviously we had the Fetish lineup with Fetish and Warns, and like if you go way back, and like never considered to join any of those teams, but always like consistent the 3rd or 4th best team in Source. As an individual player, he was fine. Again, he was not as, I wouldn't say he's bad now. He's taking on the like caller role now, and he didn't have that back then, so I guess that's holding him back a little bit now. So he was a decent individual player, and as in Western Wolves, where he wasn't calling either, where Glaive was the caller, he was again like a decent player, never putting up like the star numbers, but always like being consistent, good at his role, and I guess that's have been like his thing ever since Source. And now that he's an in-game leader, that changed a little bit, but up until his career took that different direction. He's always been consistent and like good/decent at whatever he did.
What do you think then about the fact that he's not just become an in-game leader? Because I mean, when he obviously you played with him in Dignitas, where he was an in-game leader. That was actually the first chance he took it on fully, you know. But since then, it seems like his stock as an in-game leader just goes up and up by years, you know, because obviously people were even more impressed when you and Aizy left the team and then he had to work with like Kjaerbye and stuff. And now he's got all the, you know, the firepower now. People think he's like a contender for the best in-game leader. What do you think of that? Because it's obviously different from back in the days of when he was just a player on Western Wolves and when he was in Source with you, right?
Yeah, for sure. When we brought on MSL in Dignitas, that was like we brought him in as the in-game leader. We replaced Fetish and who was it? I can't even remember. We replaced Fetish at least, and we brought in MSL like as a main in-game leader, and that was like his first real job as an in-game leader. That was like the first time he took that on him, and like he really tried to be an in-game leader, like a dedicated in-game leader, like Glaive has been for my whole career, and also MSL. Like we've always been playing with Glaive. So we brought MSL in, and like that worked out fine in the beginning. Like he was not that dominant. He wasn't as comfortable and as like demanding as he might is now. He was like still new, and he was like a new guy. You bring in a new guy to a team that is always decent. We were like the second best team in Denmark by then, and you bring in MSL, so it's hard to expect him to go in and just like lay down the pace, if you can say so. So he was like. He was taking it day by day, and he was not as demanding, not as controllable as he is now. He was like taking it step by step, and he involved like a lot during that time, during my Dignitas time. I guess we have like half a year together, or 7 or 8 months or something like that. And like from the beginning to when I got removed from Dignitas, that was like he involved a lot. But I really think it took pace when actually me and Aizy left the team, because as you said, me and Aizy back then we're 2 star players. Like we were very good, and we were putting up numbers. But that said, we also like we were put in those positions where we had to, because we demanded to be in those positions. Like we demanded that space that it took us to put up those numbers. So it was like limited what MSL actually could do tactical wise and team play wise, because he didn't dare basically. Like we demanded too much space, and he didn't dare to contest that. Not too much at least. So when we got removed from the team, both of us, I think that was his like. Again, like a new shot at him for like really taking control of the team, and he basically like formed that team, and he made them play as he wanted to, like he probably has been wanting to for a long time, but he never really dared to do with me and Aizy, because we did perform well and we did make some great results, right? But he really took control of the team, and he basically like formed the team as he wanted it to, with Config coming in and Kjaerbye coming in. Or Kjaerbye rising to becoming the star player, and Rubino coming in as like a dedicated support player. He really just took control over that team, and I think that's where he really stepped up as an in-game leader. He really took control, and I'd say like Dignitas' success, the success they had with Rubino at least before they became North was a lot down to MSL really taking over control of the team and basically just putting it down as he wanted it to be, and he believed in his like play style and what he wanted the team to do. And even when they didn't win, they kept doing the same thing, and eventually, as everyone saw, it really worked out, and now they're North and are considered one of the best teams in the world, I guess. So that's remarkable from him.
So an interesting thing you said there was the idea that when you were in Dignitas with him, he wasn't necessarily like the dominant in-game leader who's like, you know, everyone's going to do this, and this is the role you're going to play, this person, you know. To some degree, like he let the stars dictate some of that, but partly because he was new to the role himself, you know. He'd been brought in, he was like the last to join at that time. He's learning the role. And I know at the moment, now that he has all the stars, now that he has big names, you know, like Aizy and Cajun in the team, you know, to some degree, he has to maybe give up a bit of the control he had in the other era. But that middle period after the time you were with him, I know actually I'd call him I wouldn't know if I'd say stubborn. I'd just say he's one of the people who has one of the most defined ways of thinking. Like he's thought about everything a lot, but whatever conclusions he's come to, he's really certain. Actually, what's funny, the guy who was in Navi, Starix, is a bit like this. They are so certain that the way that they think is correct or is the best way right now, that you'll never like argue with them, and they'll never say like, yeah, he could be right. You know, we'll agree to disagree. The way they win arguments is either they beat your points or they just argue forever. They just never. They've always got a reason. And yeah, but what about this? And yeah, I've heard about that, but I would say this. You know, and it never ends. So, do you think that's actually, does that suit him as an in-game leader? Do you think in-game leaders should be like that? What's your take on it?
I don't know. I guess it depends on the team, because what you said right there is spot on. That's what made us have the most arguments, I guess, between me and MSL. We had periods where, as I said, we've been playing together for 5 years, so we were very good friends, and we were considered like maybe best friends. I don't know. Not anymore, obviously. But we were playing a lot together, and me and him always had like these arguments about how to play and what we wanted to do. And what you just said there is completely true, and that goes for me as well. Like, we're very stubborn, both of us. If we thought we had figured it out, we had figured it out, and if we didn't agree on what we figured out, then we would just argue forever. There was like, we never really came to any middle ground. There was not often, at least. It always just ended out in, okay, let's leave it for now, and then it just blew up later. So I guess what you're saying is definitely true. He is that kind of person, as Stark apparently also is. It didn't suit him on the team with me and Aizy on, I think, because again, we demanded too much, and maybe I was a bit too vocal about what I wanted, and Aizy was a bit like demanding in terms of what he wanted and how much base he actually needed to do his thing, because he was an amazing player in the later period of Dignitas for sure. So I think maybe back then looking in hindsight, he could maybe have backed down, or I could have backed down, or Aizy could have backed down. One of us at least needed to it. If that would have been the case, I think it would have looked a lot differently today. I would still have played with him, or Aizy would not have been gone for what was it, 2 years, 1.5 years or something. So I think you're spot on, and I think it depends on the team and what other players you have on your team. Right now, he, as you said, like, he has to give up some of the control. When you have a guy like Kjaerbye on the team, he has an opinion as well, and his opinion is very valuable, because he's a great player, and he has a great mind for Counter-Strike. So MSL has to listen, but I think it's been like, what, 2 years now, since almost 2 years, 1.5 at least, since me and Aizy left Dignitas or got removed, and I think MSL has grown as well. Like, he's found a balance now where he can he can have it his way, but he still takes input from Kjaerbye and takes input from config, even all of them. It seems like Aizy for that matter. Whereas before he would not take input in the same way. He would not manifest his own way of playing and then taking input. It was just like, either we play my way or I just give up and we play your way. And I think a part of the time he just gave up and let me and Aizy do whatever we wanted to do, and that hurt. That might have hurt the team more than it actually would have done if we just have listened to him from the beginning. But I think he has grown a lot in that role, and I think he's now more mature, and he can see the benefits of actually listening to the other player's opinion. Whereas before, it always ended up in arguments, basically, because he wanted it his way, we wanted it our way, and we never really found any middle ground.
If you look at the beginning of CSGO, then teams like, for example, Very Games being very successful, I mean, it makes a lot of sense. Like, in general, there wasn't the same hard transition, it feels like, for the CS Source players to CSGO. Like, nearly all of them that were good came over and actually have had good careers or were similarly as good. Whereas, famously, a lot of the 1.6 players, obviously, some of them would just average or just quit straight away, basically. Well, okay, it makes sense that, like, Very Games would be very good because they were already the best team at the end of Source. But it took a few months before we got a good Danish team. And that's, Fetish had always been in the best Danish teams, but he was kind of like getting together the group that would become Copenhagen Wolves, That took a few months to figure out. You guys, when you were making your team, you were getting Inglaive and Nico. And then you guys were the ones who came up as the first good Danish team. Like, you made it to those two finals. It was the Mad Cats Vienna, and then it was the Copenhagen Games, where you made the final and played against NIP. What was like the key moment, do you think, that made the team suddenly become so good? Because it was kind of out of nowhere for a lot of people.
Yeah, I think we just didn't have the right composition of players. When we first made a Nexus, like, that was the first CSGO team we had. A Nexus then became Western Wolves. We played with Cajun and we played with Rocker, I think. And Rocker was our in-game leader. And without being disrespectful to Rocker at all, he was just not nearly as good as Glaive were, neither as a caller or as a player. So when we brought in Nico and Glaive, we really brought in like the two type of players that we needed. We brought in a star AWPer, because I was playing the AWP in a Nexus, and if I have to say it myself, and I will still claim that I was pretty good with it in a Nexus, and
okay.
And I actually put up great numbers in a Nexus. I was a great player, but I was always back then like hybrid as I am today, I guess. I was playing the AWP half of the time and then playing rifle half of the time, and that worked out for us. But we brought in Nico, who obviously were like the star AWPer, and then we brought in who I to this day still claim is the best in-game leader this game has ever seen, and now he actually shows it on the best team in the world. I've said it like the last 3 years, even when he was out of the scene and didn't play. Glaive is by far the biggest wasted talent we have, and now he's no longer wasted, which is good for the scene and good for Danish Counter-Strike. So we really brought in two significantly improvements when we brought in Nico and Glaive, and I simply just think that we had the right composition of players back then. We had Nico who was going off, we had me who were going off, and then we had like the support in MSL and Nille who also had their game where they went off, and Glaive was just this monster of a caller and monster of a clutcher, and like you literally had the feeling whenever Glaive was in a clutch, you'd never lose it. Like no matter how hard it might look for him, he would always find a solution. So to me, when I think back of Western Wolves era, it was just like we had the perfect combination of players, and we all had at least in the beginning, we had the same goal and the same vision, and wanted to play as much as each other just to be good. Maybe for the exception of Nico, who always was sort of a slacker, but at least the four of us were playing a lot, and we wanted it bad, and we got to show it on what back then was the big scene at Vienna and Copenhagen Wolves.
So I feel like you are the one who has been most hard done by the legacy of Copenhagen Wolves, Western Wolves rather, sorry, in as much as, okay, now, especially now that Glaive's back to the top level, people understand, he's a fantastic in-game leader, and that was the rep he had back then as well, and then in the early days when this team came out, obviously Nico was like getting the MVPs and stuff, so people who vaguely remember him, he was a very good AWPer, and so unfortunately, I feel like they just took those two like different ends of the spectrum, like the really good in-game leader and the star, and people really do remember that team as though it was like, oh, well, they had Nico, so he must have been really good because there wasn't that many other good players with him, and then Glaive must have also been amazing because it was like, 4 supports and 1 star, and if you notice, I'm one of the only people who ever actually says, no, Pimp was like a pretty good second star at the time, he was a good player. Do you think there's a reason why you've never really gotten like respect during the times in your career when you've been good? It feels like fans in general have never really like latched onto you in the same way they have some of the others, right?
Yeah, I think it's a complicated question. I think I've always been suffering from never being the best. I guess this is me guessing. That's like my personal perspective on it. I've always been suffering in that sense, like getting the recognition that I could have gotten from being the second best. I've never been the best on my teams. Like when I was in Dignitas with Aizy, he was the best player, and he were putting up the most insane frags and the most insane matches, where I was putting up almost, I'd say, just as insane matches, but just a little bit like below him. So you like I got credit in my Dignitas times, I'd say, but it was always Aizy getting the most
Sure.
of it. Same for Western Wolves, where I actually feel like in Western Wolves, Nico were a star player and he was very, very good with the AWP, but I felt just as good as him, and I felt I performed just as good as him in my respective role. But I guess when you are a star AWPer, and especially because this game has so few of them, I think it attracts more attention in some way, and it always looks more flashy when a AWP goes off than a rifle. Maybe because rifles get easier kills from time to time. I don't know, but in general, I feel I've always been suffering from being the second best of my teams. Because it's something different when you like clearly can tell, okay, we have a team here who has a second star player, he has the support, he has the in-game leader, but then he has this like the shocks of the team or the Kenyas of the team, and that's like where all the attention goes to. So I don't know. Western Wolves, I felt that I was just as good as Nico. I felt that I was just as important for the team as Nico was, but that might just be me. I don't know. Never really bothered me because we were winning back then, and that was like what meant the most for us back then. And I felt that I did get recognition. I was not used to be in Source. I was never like this star. So when I got the taste of being like the second star, and I was performing well at big matches and big events, and got some sort of recognition from time to time, that was like enough to make me feel full of it. I didn't need the extra attention and all that kind of stuff. And I also feel it might have something to do with the repetition that I built up in Source. I was very mature, MSL was very mature, Nil was very mature, and we kind of like drew each other into some evil circle, and it took a while before each of us got out of it. So I feel there's a lot of bad vibes around us, and I feel at least other pro players still hang on to that for some time. And when you have a reputation for being some sort of child and act childish, it will always stick to you, and it will always affect the fans as well if other pros talk bad about you or says negative stuff about you. So I feel it's a combination of my rather unfortunate past, and then the fact that I've always been the second star of the team, and then never really I did never really seek that extra attention. I felt that my game showed it enough, and back then I didn't really care about it. Honestly, it was more of just us winning, and it was like this new world for us where we could actually see CSGO as a living path, and that's what like fascinated me the most, and that's what I thought about the most.
So during the time when you were getting the second places behind NIP, the problem is that was the era when NIP was doing the 87 and 0. You know, they just never lost to anyone, not even a map ever. So, you know, no one was beating them. But one thing people actually don't realize, it'll sound weird because people overrate the 87 and 0, but actually people don't realize even after they initially then lost to that Virtus Pro team, they still never used to really lose. You know, they still used to win the tournament. Maybe they dropped the odd map here and there. And so people remember, okay, you didn't win during the era when they never lost, but there was this very famous game at the time, which was at a DreamHack Summer, where not only did you guys beat them, but you beat them 16-2, and you beat them on Nuke. And just as a piece of context here, I did an article series recently where I ranked the most dominant maps in history, and that NIP's Nuke was number 1. Like, the stats are unbelievable if you ever look at it, you know. So you were the only team during this stretch to beat them. They won something like, it was like 38-1 during that period, you know. What was Western Wolves actually like as a team? Like, what were the strengths of the team? Because the part that's confusing is, normally if you hear about a tactical team without the big star names, you know, you'd think that's going to be the most consistent team. That's going to be the team without the ego problems. But you guys behind the scenes were having all these crazy, like, oh, Nico won't practice, and then, you know, oh, Niles just quit the team for a week. And what was the team like as in terms of its personality, and then in terms of the actual style and the strengths of the team?
It's a good question. I think like back then, I always talked about, like, we were young, like me, Nila, and MSL, and Glaive for that matter. We were young guys, you know. I don't know, was I 17, 16 when it? I think I was 17 when it started, you know. So we were still very immature, and we, like, when you look back at it now, I'm 21 and I've experienced a lot more in my life. Like, I can only look back and laugh at some of the arguments and some of the, like, situations we've had. But I guess it's just a natural path of growing up, and maybe we were just starting a little bit behind everyone else in terms of being mature. I don't know. So the team environment was in the beginning very good. You know, we all loved each other. We all, like, played each other. We all had fun. And everyone was having a great time. As I said, Nico didn't play as much as the rest of us, but at the time we didn't care because he was still performing as a monster, you know. So if that's what works for him, then sure thing, go ahead. I don't know what made us a strong team. I think it was mainly down to Glaive. Like, we had Nico, and we had me putting up the big numbers, and then we have Glaive, who was just. It seemed to me back then that he understood the game on a way higher level than everyone else at the time being. And it's hard to explain. It's just, you had the feeling where he just, like, whenever he talks, you listen and you take in what he says, because you respect him and you respect what he stands for so much. So it was just this common feeling from all of us that we believe so much in what Glaive said, and whenever he had a plan, we just, like, we did as he said, and we just did it to our best abilities, and we all believed in when he said something. Whereas I've had an in-game leader before, without mentioning any names, where if he said something, it was just like the first thought of line you had in your head was just like, why are we doing this? You know, where with Glaive, we just did it and we didn't ask any questions and believed in what we did. Whereas with some of the recent callers I've had were more like, why am I doing this? I don't think this is going to work. And then, like, the side effect of it would be then no, it's probably not going to work if I don't believe in it, you know. So I think that's what made us strong. You know, we didn't have, like, any, like, strict tactical approach to the game. It was more like we played on the feeling, and we played on what Glaive and some of the other of us felt, you know, because just as we respected him, Glaive also respected us. So whenever MSL saw something, he had an idea, Glaive was willing to try it. And if I heard something or saw something on the map and I, like, went for something, Glaive, like, instantly called everyone to rotate towards a situation where if I would get that kill, then that would be beneficial for us, because he had just as much trust in us as we had in him. And I think that trust really, that's what made us so good in that period, and that's also what ruined us, because when we lost that trust, which we did around DreamHack Summer, after horrible loss to Epsilon, JW and the guys back then, when they weren't considered that good players, that just, like, that broke our team, and that broke our momentum, and that broke our morale. And I think we really lived high on morale and the trust we had in each other, where just as we lost that, it just went to hell, like, pretty quick.
So one of the most shocking parts of the breakup of Western Wolves was the fact that, okay, people like Nico, people like you could get chances elsewhere. I mean, the funny thing is, I know it kind of screwed MSL as well. He just disappeared for quite a while, you know, and had to change role essentially to get back. But Glaive is the one that's really shocking, because as you say here, he had a very good reputation at the time. People would have given him a lot of credit from the team. And if you remember, Glaive really wasn't relevant in CS until Heroic, basically. Because before that, remember, when you were in SK, obviously he wasn't around, and his big problem is he just constantly went down and down and down, you know. So in the early days when he left, what people don't realize is in the early days, there weren't enough teams. So you could still be in like, you know, the third or fourth best team in a country and you might maybe qualify for a major. So he played in other majors, you know, but they were never relevant. They were never going to go far. And then the problem is as the scene got bigger and bigger and bigger, it's like everyone just moved up past him, you know, and suddenly he's in like, you know, like now the fourth or fifth best Danish team, and now Denmark isn't even the best, you know. So it felt like he was just lost forever. And as you said here, one of the biggest wasted talents. He's never going to come back. And if you remember, so many times I've asked you, what is Glaive doing still? Like, is he still out there? Is he still playing? And you'd always be like, yeah, he's still playing. But like, you know, I mean, I remember you telling me he doesn't even in-game lead anymore now. Obviously, people kind of know a little bit of the details of he had some personal issues. Like he had the whole thing with his girlfriend. And then people essentially in the scene, he got the worst kind of rep, which is like, doesn't even do his role and people don't want to play with him. So as someone who's known him for a long time, how would you explain the mystery? What happened to Glaive? Like, how did he just disappear for so many years and yet come back and be amazing?
Well, I think it all started with we had him on our team in Copenhagen Wolves. I think like that was after the Western Wolves. We kind of teamed up again. I think we were like apart for each other, but then we teamed up, 4 of us together. Like we almost reformed the old Western Wolves team. Only having Fitchish instead of, I actually don't remember, but we had Glaive. Anyway, we went to an event where there was a controversial thing with him and his girlfriend and some of the other on our team and me as well. And that just like that killed our relationship to Glaive for a time being, and that again down to being like handling the situation very immature. There was mistakes being made from Nico and Glaive, and they had their girlfriends clashing together because both of them couldn't be there. And then I was as the third man trying to be the middleman, and then I screwed up saying maybe too aggressive stuff to both of them and all that kind of stuff. So that kind of like killed. It killed Glaive in the beginning because he got changed for Fetish. We literally switched out Glaive for Fetish, which back now thinking about it is the stupid decision we've ever taken, any of us, because he's years better than Glaive. That is years better than Fetish has ever been or will ever be. But that sent Glaive out in cold, and I don't remember in particular what he did after, but I do believe that he had like almost a year where he didn't play more than 5 hours a week maximum. Okay. Like he literally stopped playing, and he went out enjoying life, going to parties and just like living his life, whatever he might have done. I don't know. And then he, as like I didn't speak that much to him. Then he started playing again, and he, after some time being, he formed Copenhagen Wolves with Snappy. Like he literally formed the heroic lineup. He literally formed Copenhagen Wolves and gave it another shot, you know, and they quickly became good, you know. I still remember when I was playing in SK, like I was like, God damn it, why don't we have Glaive on our team right now, you know? And God damn it, how can they perform so good? Because their lineup was, I don't even remember. It was Copenhagen Wolves. It was Glaive, Snappy.
I think it was before Valdi. I think they had I might have had Valdi, in fact, at the time.
Yeah. It's like, I don't know, like SMF, I think, a Danish guy. I don't know if you recognize him.
Yeah.
But like it was really, really low tier players. They were not that good, but they performed like really, really good, and they were close a lot of times to qualifying for what back then were considered like big events still, like the DreamHack Master or the DreamHack Opens, beat the current G2 lineup with Shocks and all those guys on it a few times in qualifiers, and actually sent them out in the cold. So he was like already back then starting to get some of the repetition back for being this great player. And as like you said in the pre-talk about Glaive, like it was not that people didn't want to play with him. It was more like he's been invisible for that long that people really didn't know what to think of him. As said, like he didn't call in Copenhagen Wolves. That was actually Snappy. So when I as a like player and a person look at him, it was like, Glaive, we used to respect you so much for your calling skills, you know. We used to think that you were the best caller in the world, and I still think you could be. And I even said that to him, like when I asked why is he not calling Copenhagen Wolves, and he was just like, I don't remember in particular what he said word by word, but it was more like, Snappy is doing a great job, and I'm not sure that I am at my best when I like fully control and fully call, because he felt he has some individual skills to show off as well when he was like the second guy calling, or not as locked down by calling. And I always like told him, and I always thought to myself that like if only you knew how much you do for a team when you're not calling, it doesn't matter. Like it literally doesn't matter if he only puts up 5 frags a game, because he's that good at calling, and he makes your team believe that much in what you're doing, you know. Whereas a player like MSL has to put up still like a decent amount of number. He can't go like 0 in every single game, you know, and still be valued as high as he is now. Like he's still a little bit further away from the Glaive I at least think of, that would have played with MSL for a while. But Glaive was that good, It gets the sense that he was that good. And I simply think that he just like was confused, and he thought he was more valuable not being the caller, which he now found out for sure that he's not. Like he's calling in Astralis, he's calling in the best team in the world in 2017, where the game is blowing up. You literally can't ask for a better comeback, I guess it is, after a year out where he literally didn't play any serious Counter-Strike.
Even though you have spent most of your career in sort of a rivalry with most of the Astralis guys, because they were always in the other team. They were the Copenhagen Wolves, and then, I mean, we'll talk about this in a second, but you did briefly play with them, and they kicked you, In general, okay, when teams are rivals domestically, I know for interviews, people normally try to be like the PR guy, like, no, I always cheer for the other team when I go out, But realistically, some of those guys, you must have like a personal rivalry with it, etc. Do you actually get any satisfaction from seeing a Danish team be like the number one team in the world and having like, it looks like, they could have their own era and all this sort of great stuff, Do you care about that? Is there any sort of national pride there?
To completely honest, no. There's no national pride in it. Like, I really do respect Glaive and Device, for example. I guess I'm more like the type of person who respects like the players more than like the national pride and all that kind of stuff. No, because obviously if I could, I'd love to be on the best Danish team, but I'd love to be the guy being on the best team. That's like you're spot on. I've like seen countless of matches where you really hope that your Danish fellas lose, because then they're not better than you. That's just how it is.
Yeah, exactly.
Like it's bullshit saying otherwise, but I've probably done it myself. But that's how it is. But I do respect the fact that Glaive and Device and like the rest of the guys, it's not like they don't deserve respect. Kjaerbye for that matter, like those three guys especially, I respect what they are and what they stand for and the work they put in for it. Like Glaive of the reason we already talked about, Device being the monster he is and putting in the work that it requires, and Kjaerbye I have like a personal connection to, I guess, from our time in Dignitas, and like he really took a big step when I left the team, and I'm not proud saying this, but I might have holding him back a little bit, because me and Aizy in particular, because we were not nice to him and we didn't give him any space, and I in particular didn't care about him in like I cared more about myself and cared more about Aizy than I cared for Kjaerbye, So the fact that he's been able to turn that around and become the player he is today is like, I respect that, and I respect that from my heart, I guess. So I more respect the players and their ways of getting to the top than actually respecting that. Like I wouldn't care if they were Danish or Swedish. It's just the fact that I know the Danish guys better, obviously, so it's easier to respect them for what they're doing.
Okay. So yeah, so go back in time, because this ties into this, obviously, is after Western Wolves, you did basically hop over to the other team. And at the time, Western Wolves, when it split up, was the best Danish team. But Copenhagen Wolves, which is the team that was fetish, and then it was basically the Astralis guys now. It was Zipnix, it was Device, it was Dupree. And then at times they had Cage and they didn't. He was always in and out of the lineup just because that's been his personality for a long time. So in the time, they brought in you and they brought in Freeze, and you guys, like, it was going pretty well. I remember you had like top 4 at ESWC or something. You actually helped them qualify for the first major, which is DreamHack Winter 2013. But then they kicked you, and then they brought back, I'm trying to think if that was, I think that was before they brought back, I think they brought in Nico instead of you and someone else. They did a kick like that, basically, and you were left kind of out in the cold. Now, the interesting thing is, I know over the years, one of the problems with the split between those two teams back then was that actually, it's funny, this just shows how much those teams have underperformed, the Copenhagen Wolves type core. Even back then, they were thought of as the team that had all the skilled players and the young players and stuff. And people thought of the Western Wolves team, unfortunately, as like, oh, they were really tactical and, Glaive did a great job, kind of like I said before. And so, unfortunately, if it was you or it was Nili or MSL, people felt as though you weren't even considered for what's now the Astralis core. They just thought, well, we're better than this guy. He was only good because he was in that team that was good. So, do you feel like they gave you a proper shot when you were in that team? I mean, you weren't in it for that long. You did all right, didn't you?
I did decent. I didn't play at my Western Wolves level at all. That's fair to be said, but I did decently. I remember specifically what happened, and I got replaced by Device actually after ESWC.
Oh, he came back, yeah.
He came back, so I wouldn't say they didn't give me a fair chance. Like, they gave me a chance, and I could have played better in that period for sure. But I didn't play bad. I did okay, I did what I did. I think it was me and Dupree who were mainly putting up great numbers in that period. But then I sort of started to slack off after the first few months, after my honeymoon period, I guess. And when the time came, like Nico was on the market and Device was on the market. He wanted to get back into Copenhagen Wolves, and it's hard to hold those players off. Nico replaced Freeze, which is our obvious move, I guess, back then, because Nico was insane and Freeze was not playing that well. And me for Device was, I guess, a no-brainer when you look at it now, right? It's like I don't feel I could do much more. Obviously, I could have played better, but I'm not even sure that would have helped me in that scenario. I think it would have happened nevertheless. So I don't really think too much about that. That was my first kick ever. I always been good on my teams and always been one of the best. So I never felt the feeling of being kicked. But I literally got kicked, and I was sad about it. But thinking about it now and thinking about it like a few months after, I don't really feel I could do much more. I could have played better for sure, but I hardly see it help me. Like maybe I would have stuck onto the team a month or two more, but inevitably Device would have come back at some point, and Nico was coming back for free. So, I don't feel I could do anything to prevent that.
So the rough part after that kick is that it's funny, the context of Danish CS now, it's crazy. It's like it's the best in the world. Now we're getting to the point where, this Singularity team just beat a bunch of pro teams, So now it's like you can go beyond 3 teams even in Denmark. But back then, the saddest thing about Danish CS for a couple of years was until you got that Dignitas lineup together, it was 2015 and it actually became good. All of you who weren't in Copenhagen Wolves, which became Dignitas, which became TSM, which became Astralis, everyone who wasn't in the top team basically was kind of like in a wasteland. And it's like all these players, everyone was still playing. Aizy was out there, Glaive was out there, MSL was out there, you were out there, Nico was out there. All these players were out there. It's just somehow whatever 5-man combos you got together just never did anything. Funnily enough, I've gone and looked at some of those old majors, and there are teams where it'll be like Aizy, Pimp, someone else, and you're like, how does this team not qualify or does it not get out of a group? But it just never happened. Did you ever wonder when you were out in that period, kind of how I set up the last question, like it felt like you weren't going to get back into essentially what was Astralis, right? They were kind of like, they'd passed on you. Did you ever wonder, like, is my career just going to be at this level now? Like, am I ever going to be able to play at a higher level again? Because it was like a solid year or so, things weren't that great, right?
Yeah, it was like, I remember like 3D Max period, and I think we then became Copenhagen Wolves in the beginning, or in the later part of the year. Like that year was very rough. Like ever since I got kicked from Copenhagen Wolves, I was not playing on a top 10 team in the world. I think like us in 3D Max, which was, what was it even? I don't remember the lineup, but we were not playing well. We were simply not doing well. At least not well enough, and definitely not to the Western Wolves level that we had, most of us. And it was me, MSL, Nille, and Aizy, and Rals at some point.
Yeah, Rals, that's right.
Yeah. And why, I don't know. I think we lost like the touch, I think we really lost, and feels kind of weird to say this, but again, like we lost the guidance of Glaive. MSL back then was not good enough to call by himself and actually call for a top 5 team in the world, and the rest of us just didn't pick it up as much as we probably should have or could have. So that was a very rough year, as you just described it. But to answer your question, no, I never felt that I'm not coming back. I still felt good back then. I still felt that I was a very good player. I still felt like very confident in myself, and I still felt that whenever the chance come, maybe Astralis is going to pick me up again, because I showed on all those teams I've been on, like that I'm a very reliable player in terms of putting up great numbers and actually being valuable in terms of bringing in tactical stuff as well. What held me back then was definitely my attitude, and the fact that it maybe frustrated me more than it made me happy that I felt I was this good, but never on a team that actually could do anything anyway. So no, I never gave up, and I still haven't to this date. I still believe that I can be the old Pimp. Now it's been like almost a year again, where I'd say it's been a rough career for me the last year. But nobody is to tell me that I can turn that around again, as I already once did with after the 3D Max period, and after I got kicked from Copenhagen Wolves. It was like a similar career path, I guess, where it might be harder now because there's so many good teams, but I know how good I am, and I know that eventually it'll turn around.
So another tough part about that era, because basically 2014, in terms of like the high points of your career, was like just a write-off, like nothing happened that was good basically, and you had all these different lineups you were trying to make work. But there's also the fact that because CSGO only really, for me, really started to blow up in like 2015, that's when the salaries started to get crazy, you know, and there was more orgs coming in. So in 2014, if you weren't in a top team as well, there wasn't much money to be made, you know. It was like you really had to grind just to make a living. Was it actually, can you remember exactly the date when you decided to do stuff like improve your health, lose weight and stuff? What period was that? Do you remember? Because it has to be before Dignitas. So it has to be like most early 2015 or late 2014.
Actually, no, it was like in my Dignitas period. We were Copenhagen Wolves. And then we got an offer from Dignitas, the organization. So the whole team just changed to becoming Team Dignitas. That was,
it must be early 2015 then, because it was after obviously the Dignitas lineup with the TSM.
Yeah, exactly. So it was around that period. I remember like it was when I started my last year in school. So it must have been 2015. Yeah, it must have been 2015. But it was like in my Dignitas period, and what I to this date still would consider my best like individual period in Dignitas, where me and Aizy were going off and were putting up great numbers. That was like at the same time I started to get healthy or lose weight and all that kind of stuff. Like that like kind of like held each other in hand. So the more fit I got, I felt I played better. Which doesn't have to be connected, but it was more like a confident thing, I guess, where I started to feel way more confident about myself and about who I were as a person, and that reflected a lot of my game, and that reflected in our performances in Dignitas, I guess. So yeah.
Okay, so that's an interesting point, because that is something that I notice is a difference. Like the problem is the old Pimp, because you, like you said, you had a rep when you were younger, like maybe you were, I mean, people use that term now, toxic, which is, unfortunately, it's taken on a life of its own, that word. But okay, we know basically the idea is that, you know, like maybe whining or complaining or saying rude things or whatever. That's what people can remember it back in those days. But once you lost all the weight and you started to get healthy again, I know just from some of the shit I've seen at like after parties, your confidence level went through the roof, right? Suddenly you felt like all of life was ahead of you or something, right?
Yeah, for sure. I felt I got my life back, you know,
So when you had this period, which it did coincide with basically, I actually think probably the best period of your career, because you have to consider that Dignitas as a team probably wasn't as good overall as the Western Wolves team. And obviously the game had gotten harder. And middle of 2015, that's the Fnatic era. That's a very, very competitive era. And this Dignitas team, which had a lot of the players I've mentioned in past versions that weren't doing that well in 2014, and everyone was like, what's going on? Suddenly, you and Aizy especially obviously developed as a player, because people remember he'd had his chance in the top Danish team, but he maybe was the most hard done by player, because he's the guy where he joined and they almost just shoved him in his corner, like, you just do that over there, we do our stuff, you know? So he became like a superstar. You were playing fantastically well. That summer must have been a revival for you, right? Did you think that you were back?
I thought I was back for sure. That was like, I felt I was back on my Western Wolves level for that, or was it like 4 or 5 months where I like the way I think about it was me and Aizy just like AWPing everyone. Like it really felt like that. As I said, like we took a lot of space, but it really felt that we deserved it because we were playing that well. You know, we were putting up great numbers at all the events we went to, and we were always like battling for like not the MVP, but we never like battled for the MVP because we never made the finals. But like had we made the finals, we would definitely have been considered to be player of the tournaments because we always put up great numbers. So yeah, it felt great, and I felt that I was back, I guess. But yeah, that quickly ended. That like with the whole kicking of Hiko thing, changed our team, changed our dynamics, made me play the AWP more than I should have for sure. That was a mistake made by me first of all, but I wouldn't blame it on myself at all. But he felt he was, or at least it felt to me that he was keen on the idea as well. It came from me for sure, but he was keen on it as well. So I guess it's like a combination of me being not wise enough back then and him in leadership fail, I guess. So that really turned it around again, and then it was really frustrating coming from such a great period, and like we had for so long been just under the top, you know. For so long I remember like 4 or 5 events where we lost in the semifinal to Envious twice, where I both games felt that this we should have won. Like not even saying this because like you always have the feeling that you should have won this game or something.
Sure, yeah.
We really should have won the game, you know, if you look at it objectively. We had a Copenhagen Games, which was the first MSL or the first event with MSL, and we were leading TSM. They were TSM back then, like now Astralis. We were leading them 9-2 T-side on Inferno, and we somehow managed to throw that away. Like we had so many events where we came so close to getting to the finals, and I think we lost 4 or 5 semifinals in a row. And that was like putting up great numbers and losing is frustrating. And then not being able to, in the later stage of Dignitas after Nico left, not being able to put up great numbers and feeling that we are falling in level and we're losing to teams that we shouldn't lose to is extremely frustrating. And it felt extremely frustrating for me. And that's where some of the attitude came out for me. And that was a period where I didn't handle it very well, I'd say, like personally. That's like by far one of the most like learning experience I've had, because there's lots of stuff I could have done differently. First of all, playing wise, never picked up the AWP on a full-time basis, and then attitude wise as well. Like I got too easy frustrated because coming from such a good period, then to go into a transition to something worse it just takes the toll on you. And there was a lot of things going on in that Dignitas lineup and all that kind of stuff that is not really worth talking about right now. But it really just was a frustrating period, and it eventually ended in me being cut. What was it like? Actually being cut before the zews finals, which I didn't know by then. But then we went to an event and I found out. So that was like not a pleasant experience either, because I think that was my first event ever in the States. So yeah, it was just like a very rough, very messy, and very unfortunate period.
Okay, so when do we talk about like just before that, when things were going really well, and as you said, you were putting up MVP numbers? How would you describe your playing style then? Like is there a player you were like, or what were the strengths of Pimp back then?
It's a good question. Back then it didn't feel like it is very more like how to say it. A lot of people like to compare players now, compare to like what type are they, what are they doing, who do they look like, who do I want to be? I gotta copy somebody, I gotta watch somebody's demo and do whatever he does. I never really fell for that. I still feel I do what I feel is right, and I probably was passive in that sense. I felt like I never took any stupid duels. I didn't feel like that. I never took any chances. I played with literally no risk if needed, or if possible. Sometimes it was needed to take risk, and then I would do it. But most of the time I played with no risk. I played, at least according to myself, I played smart in a lot of scenarios where you have younger guys coming and now believing so much in their aim that they just like rule out the whole element of playing smart or playing on information, all that kind of stuff where their aim can carry it. I never felt that my aim could, or I never like tried it, I guess, when my aim actually was good to play like that. So I didn't feel back then that I could carry that, just being literally brain dead and running around, which today is a way more attractive play style, because those players are very valuable, because they really do sometimes they just like mess a whole team up by being unpredictable and having the aim to carry the more or less, you could say, stupid or less smart play style, but then again, it is smart if it works right. So I consider myself a passive player and a very like well thought player, but then again, I could step up when needed. I really felt that when I was in a clutch or when I was in a situation where it was 2-2 or 3-3, I would always end up winning it, because I would always kill them somehow, if it was on my aim or it was outsmarting them or it was just like playing by the feeling. I always ended up winning, I felt. And it's hard to explain or hard to describe how that feels, but it was just like the sixth sense for the game, I guess I had, which I've recently haven't had that much, I guess. So I'm still trying to find back to that. Aim-wise, I was a good aimer. I had a great aim, for sure, but nothing like config alike, for example, who is like pure insane aim, so yeah, I guess like nowadays I compare myself to might sound a little bit over exaggerating, but like a cold Sewer, just less good, because he's sort of the same, he really plays most of the time with no risk, but his aim is just so steady and consistent that he always end up getting a lot of kills. It doesn't have to be flashy for him. It doesn't have to be like, you never see him rush in brain dead or do something brain dead. There's always like feels like there's a thought behind it, and his aim is just so consistent, and his sixth feeling in clutches is just so good and consistent. And I felt I had the same back then, maybe on a less big scale than obviously he is now, because he's the best player in the world and he's really brought the level to another game. But I had some of those elements in my game back then.
Okay, so when you talk now about this era just after that, so that might have been like the career, you were in fantastic form, everything was working well, you had your style, you had your team. If someone then hears that you decided, once Nico was kicked, the primary AWPer, who wasn't doing a very good job, right, I'm going to be the primary AWPer now, and I'm going to do it quite often. if someone hears that, well, you talk now, you're saying all the right things. Nah, you know, now I look back, I shouldn't have done it, all the rest of it, you know. This is one of the few times, right, where I will just say, I did tell you so. Like, I told you and MSL, like, what is this plan? This plan makes no sense. You're taking one of the best players on your team who has a style that works, and you're saying, it's like saying, oh, someone has, like, a really bad illness in his leg, so let's just, like, chop off his working arm and put it as his leg. It's like, that makes no sense at all. And so, even though you take a lot of the blame for it now and say, you know, it was my idea, here's the thing, there's two aspects going on here. One, even at the beginning of this interview, you tried to slip it in under there, like, I was a pretty good AWPer at the beginning of Nexus or whatever. Exactly. So I know even now in the back of your mind, you still secretly believe you're some good AWPer. But the other thing is, MSL himself, I think he maybe even said this in my interview with him, I think at the time MSL was one of those players who thought you had to have an AWPer. You know, he only really went to like the 5 rifle era the next year, you know. But I know because he'd had Nico, and then, you know, after you, actually he was AWPing himself. You know, I think it sounds like it was a mixture of the two. Like, you thought you could make it work somehow, and then he kind of wanted someone to do it anyway. So the only bad part about that I want to ask about is, the part that I never quite understood was the way you got kicked, because you would think when it didn't work out, and by the way, by the end, it really wasn't working out, you know, it was really poor. You would think the logical thing that MSL would do is say, okay, right, it didn't work out, so let's just go back in time, right? Pimp, you're back to a rifler, we need to get an AWPer, problem solved. Aizy's leaving anyway, so we need a new player. You know, no need to have to get 2 players. But instead, he kicked you, and I think in his interview, he even kind of admitted, like maybe that was a bit harsh, you know, like to just go ahead and do it like that. But you said that at one point in time, MSL was like your best friend. Well, I know that when he kicked you, it wasn't just like, okay, listen, this is just business, no hard feelings. Both of you actually had pretty hard feelings against each other for a while after that. There was some sniping back and forwards I saw on Twitter sometimes. So what were the circumstances of getting kicked? It sounds like it was pretty brutal.
Yeah, combination of a lot of things. As we talked about just before, like, it was a very frustrating period for me. Like, going from being this like highly great performing player, going from believing in that we just needed this last touch and we would be able to fight TSM every time, we would be able to get into finals, and like those losses against Envious and Astra or TSM, and like those semifinal losses were so hard on us. Then when we actually faced like real. Like when we actually faced the fact where we were not even able to like get out of the groups and we played horribly, it was very hard for me, like really, really hard for me, and it led to frustration, and it led to not acting in the same way and as when it was going well for us, and that's something I guess I regretted, or something I look back at and think that's not good. You know, that's a learning experience for sure. Is if you can have a great attitude when things are going well, then you sure as hell also can have it when you're losing, you know, because otherwise it's not working. And I didn't have that. It's fair to say. That, and we had like a lot of problems internally. Like, we had the whole Snyder episode where he managed to fuck up as bad as we had to kick him a week before a major, you know. And
yeah,
it's like, I don't even want to get into the specific. He knows it, and he should just be thankful that we never really put that out.
Released the info, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, he must have forgotten that, Snyder. He must have forgotten. Yeah, we just had a lot of problems. Kicking Hiko, getting in Snyder, getting rid of Snyder, getting in Tensky. It was just like, it was so messy, and so it just didn't feel right, you know. And as that whole thing happened, you know, it just like built up more frustration, and I was never really like able to get out of it, you know. I think now, if you look back at it, if MSL would have like said, okay, we bring in another AWPer, or we put you back in your old role and we figure something else out, we get some like support player in and we play with 5 rifles, like, I'm not even sure that would have helped. I think potentially it would have been great, you know, and I think potentially that could have released my many of my frustrations at least. But I think it also comes down to the fact that it was in a period where MSL had taken so much shit, and the whole team has taken so much shit, and we were so frustrated, all of us basically. Like, Aizy left the team, so he was never really happy about it either. So MSL was like coming to a point where I think he was like, okay, fuck this. Excuse my word, but he really just thought, now I'm taking control, you know. Now it's the time for me to get rid of whoever is not willing to do this, and he didn't think I was willing to, which I can't blame him for, because I never really showed that I would be willing to play a part in such a team-based game. Like, me and Aizy never like expressed that we would be willing to. So So he just like took the tool and he said like, fuck this, I'm getting rid of whoever's not willing to do this. And that was me basically, and Aizy. And then he like built up his own team. And I just think like he hit a wall where he had too much, and now he wanted to take control over the whole thing. So I think it was a combination of that and then like this very rough 3 months where we didn't perform well and we had problems with Snyder and like everything was just a mess in that period.
Even though, I mean, you're describing a lot of things that sound frustrating here, and especially that position you were in before. Like, as much as you want to say it's good to play well yourself, it makes it more frustrating than if you don't win, because it's like, well, I'm doing everything I can do, what? Come on, guys. So what would you say if I told you that when other people from other teams or former teammates talked to me, they said Pimp was a bit toxic in this period. Like, he was an asshole, and that's basically the reason he got cut, not because he was a bad player,
Yeah, I don't think it's unfair to say that at all. I think, as I said, like it comes down to more than just me being frustrated and me being sort of toxic or whatever you want to say. Obviously, there's always two sides of the story, and there's always like it takes two persons to have an argument, basically.
Sure.
And I was not always right for sure. I know that now, and I guess I also knew it back then. But it takes more than one person to fuck something up. So without like pulling out my angel glory or anything like that, it was mostly on me, I'd say, but there were still other factors that played in, and still other factors that could have been better. But it was just this combination of a lot of things that made me act in a way that I'm definitely not proud of, and eventually led me to being removed from Dignitas back in 2015. Must have been.
Yeah. So, well, the funny thing is, as you said, during the period when both you and Aizy were doing really well and the team was doing well in terms of results, yeah, people were giving Aizy some attention, but the side effect of your problems with the AWPing period where the team was really struggling was that Aizy was like the only good thing left in that team, and he was going so nuts and the team was terrible. Like, if you remember, famously, people often wonder, I think, why we bring this up, but at DreamHack Cluj-Napoca, you guys went out in the groups 0 and 2. You just lost both maps. So if you say someone only played 2 maps, it's like, come on, how well could he really have played in 2 maps? But in those 2 maps, he went absolutely mental. He was like unreal the level he was playing. And at the CEVO LAN you were talking about, the one that where you lost in the groups there to Conquest, that was the one I remember where he got around against Virtus Pro, where he had like 4 Deagle kills, and I actually still to this day say I think that's like the best round I've ever seen on LAN. Like it's like unreal. He has to basically do like 4 1 bullets in all of the VP, like one of the best teams in the world, all of their heads to win the round. But he was doing all that and losing all the games. If people know the level he was at then, and then they hear, at the time, you go into FaZe, which, they had some good players, and this, it was G2 at the time, but, the same thing. You go into another team, people would think, right, I'm going to bet that this guy's going to have a fantastic career, he's going to have way better things. So if people then find out what actually happened, which is, for him, FaZe was almost like, he was never in the good phases, basically. It was only towards the end he got half decent. And then now he's in North, which, on paper, again, looks fantastic, but he hasn't really found his role yet, it feels like. What do you think happened to Aizy? Because he was one of the rising talents in the world at the time, and it feels like, I always call him like the lost man, he's I don't know what happened to him since then.
Yeah, definitely not wrong about that. I think Aizy had his period where he was playing very, very well with us, and then he got snatched by, what they called TSM back then? I don't really remember. Like the Astralis lineup today. So we had like half a year with Fetish and Device, Shipnix and Dupuy, I think it was. And as you said, like he never like got any foot on that team. Like he never got to do anything. He literally described himself, I believe, at one point when he came back, like he was just a bomb carrier. He literally felt that he was being used as a bomb carrier. Like that's like fucked up. Especially when you were as good as he was. I know you have like Fetish. That's like one of the things about Fitch is like he has never been a great leader, and I'm sorry to like he's a nice person and all, but speaking game wise, he's never been a leader or a great leader or a leader that understood like much. To be honest, he always just had the best players around him. So when you have a Device on your team, you're like determined to be a top team. When you have Wants in Source, you're determined to win because he's just insane. Like it doesn't really matter who Shux has as an in-game leader if he's on the team. That's basically how I always felt about Fetty. So he definitely ruined him. Like that's it in TSM or what they were called back then. I don't even know. Dignitas, yeah, exactly. So yeah, then he got off it and he got onto our Dignitas lineup. I don't remember at what point, but he like instantly picked it up again. Like it didn't take him more than like a month or so, if I remember correct, to be this monster, and then he was just this monster for 7 months straight, basically. He got a lot of space. Me and Aizy got a lot of space, and Aizy in particular got a lot of space. He was playing roles where you in modern CS today would probably say that's support roles, but he like got support from the roles that he probably should have like supported himself. So he really like he was set up to win and do well, and he like thankfully for us he did like insanely well, and he was like. It was fair in some way that he got that much space and got all the attention because he was playing that good. If you're a player that is able to do that, then you better make sure that he has everything he needs to do it because he was that good. I think he suffers a lot from like that's his only good period. In Counter-Strike, he doesn't seem like a player that functions that well when he doesn't have that in him. Like it just doesn't seem to work that well for him. Not saying he's bad or anything like that. I think he's been performing well in North, not to the AC standards he had in Dignitas, and I doubt you're ever going to see that again on any team. Because it's like you gotta be a Simple or Cold Zero in order to put up those numbers consistently in modern CS today. And AC is not there right now, simple as that. But he's still a good player.
What do you think then about his personality? Because that's one thing that really confused me. Is normally when a player has a little period like that where they're really good on a bad team, it's kind of like you were just describing there. They'll be like a Simple type person where if anything, people think they have too much confidence and they think they know too well. But I know with Aizy it wasn't like that at all. Like this is the way I always described them in FaZe. Okay, is when they would do badly. The reason I always had respect for Rain is I know that it actually killed him when they did badly, and he thought like, I should be a better player than this. We should be in a better team. But some of the others in that team, Jacob, Aizy, I'm pretty sure they'd even admit this. They really were just like beaten down, and they were like, oh well, yeah, we just suck. Like, I guess we just keep playing, get the salary, but there's nothing we can do. And he never seemed like he had like the fire to play even when things weren't going well. What from the times you've known him, what's his personality like as a person?
He's a very calm guy. He's one of the guys where you have to drag it out of him. He's not gonna say his opinion, or he's not gonna say what he means if you don't ask the right questions. So I guess that's partly down to that. It's like I like Aizy a lot, and I think he's a cool dude, and he's fun to be around. But he's not like the leader type of person. He's not like the guy going first in doing stupid shit or having fun. He's like a follow-up guy, but like again, a very cool dude, nothing against him, but you really got to drag it out. It felt like you got to drag out what he means or what he thinks, and ask the right questions. Otherwise, he would just give you like some hold off answers, who just like go away. I don't want to talk about it answers. So he's very calm, and he's always been like that. So I think that was healthy for him, like in the period where he was insane, But he was playing so well, and we were winning so little or doing so bad that I know it got to him at some point. Like I in particular remember the major qualifier. I think it was the second Cologne event, like in the big Land 6 arena. Like we missed the major qualifier, losing in the deciding game against Flipside after leading 12-3. And he was playing a great game, and that's like the biggest throw and the most important game that I ever felt that we lost, which we should have won. And that like I know that killed him. That was rough for him, but not more rough than he like a few days after would really think about it. He was like seems like a guy who's like when he experienced something bad or something frustrating, and that might line up with what you just said. Like it feels like it takes a few days, and then he just like don't care or he doesn't think about it. And that can be in many situations it's a healthy thing, but I'd also say like it's a bad thing in some other situations. Maybe the one in FaZe where things really were going to hell in some periods. So that's like the Aizy. He's a very calm, fun dude, cool to hang around, but his opinions only comes out, at least back then. I don't know how he is now. If you really asked the right questions, or if you really like, it almost felt that you had to pressure him to get to know what he actually meant.
So after the period where you and Aizy, who had, as we said, been the star players of Dignitas, left, this is one of the reasons why MSL got so much credit the next year, even though Dignitas actually as a team did like almost nothing in terms of big results, is because in theory, he had no star players on paper, but he took Kjaerbye, a guy who, I used to always in a friendly manner, fuck with Aizy, Kjaerbye and be like, you're the best online player in the world. for this is a LAN. So, you know, like that sort of thing, you know, because the thing is, he had talent, but he was one of those guys where, for whatever reason, when you and Aizy were in the team, it never really came out in the big LAN matches, you know. He always just seemed like another player on the team, you know, which is crazy when you think what he's doing now in Astralis and what he did next in Dignitas. You know, you'd think there'd be some hint of that, but for whatever reason, he just never looked like he was going to be a star player. So him going so crazy in the team the next year with MSL, like going, you know, really heavily into tactics, like, does it make you think back on the period when you played with him? Like what was holding him back then, or what did he need as a player to become this star player?
Yeah, I guess my perspective is a little bit different. I don't necessarily agree with that. Like, I think he did show like some star potential back then, but okay. Maybe online more than LAN. Like, definitely he didn't have the best LAN event. So like when you were saying what you were saying, you're not wrong. But in practice online and in a lot of online matches, he was playing well. You know, he was playing with potential to be like this third star, maybe taking over from one of us at some point. You know, he was showing a lot of potential for sure. But for some reason, he never made it work on LAN. Not as well, at least. And that's like, for some players, I guess it just takes a little bit longer to get that feeling for it, you know. Whereas today, like, he has no problems at all performing in LAN. He won a freaking major. No, he's doing well. Sure. But back then, he was like, he was just not performing. I don't know if, like, we often talked about him in MSL, I think, and like the guys on the team, like, why is it he's not working on LAN? You know, why is he so good online? And it's not that bad. Like, I made it sound very bad. There was just like too big of a difference between him playing on LAN and on. And we never really found an answer. I guess he got a lot of more space, and he like in the period where I was like acting out and being very frustrating, like he was always around me. So we often had like a lot of arguments, me and Kjaerbye. So I was like close to him and we were playing together. So I can only imagine it was hard for him sometimes to play around me, and it must have been frustrating sometimes. And online he made it work, but at LAN it didn't work. You know, I'm not gonna put that blame on me because I honestly don't think that has much to do with me, but that might be part of it. And then I think he just got older. You know, as MSL, he got older. He got more experience at LAN. He learned every time. And when me and Aizy left, he got a little extra space, and that's just when it took off. You know, I think it's like a natural learning curve for him, to be honest. It just takes longer for some players. Like Config, for example, it took him like a month or two in SK, and then onto Dignitas, and then like he's been beasting ever since. You know, he just got it faster. You know, not saying Config is a better player than Kjaerbye. They're kind of similar, I guess, in terms of like their level, but it just went quicker for Config. He was just a different type, and he didn't need that like comforting that Kjaerbye might have needed in the beginning, you know, which we couldn't provide, like neither of us on the team.
Sure. So one of the things that was kind of rough was that you'd had this Dignitas period, which was like the revival, you know, and then it was like you're right back to the period where he had to go to SK, and you know it was back to tough times again, because in SK, yeah, there was some decent players in this team, but unfortunately, like some of them weren't as good as they've become now, like the Magic Spoys of the world, etc. Obviously now were fantastic. Back then, they were too young, you know. Then you had the older players who aren't at the top level now, but hadn't quite made their way down the ladder, you know. Then you had like, you know, someone like Modi was kind of in the middle, you know. That was a team where when you look back now on paper, it looks like that team shouldn't really succeed, right? Like there's a lot of problems in that lineup.
Yeah, there was like... It was like, again, it's been very frustrating for me because that lineup was like, I thought to myself, this lineup can be decent. If I can play as well as I did with Rifle before, I can come in. They did put up like a decent result that was a Fragbite Masters or something, like having one upset win that made them go a little bit further than they were predicted to. Magic Boy were like, I knew next to nothing about him. Like I had no idea who that guy was, even when I joined the team. So it was like a gamble, and I thought like, okay, this could maybe work out. But as you said, the combination of players, the fact that we didn't really have an in-game leader. We had a Cillian, but he's not meant to be an in-game leader. At least not back then. He was trying his best, and I can only like respect him for trying his best. We were not a team that was easy to work with, so even when he tried to implement new stuff and like really tried to take on that role, we never really let him. Like none of us, to be honest. It was just like the whole team environment was never great, which comes down to some certain individuals who was hard to work with, I guess. So yeah, that was like never really set up to succeed. I'd say that we tried, and that's again like that to me is the roughest period of my like career. You know, I was really not feeling well in SK. I was really feeling that that's maybe one of the only times I've really like considered, is this game really for me, or can I really like get back? It was not even that I played bad. I remember I was playing well. I had a very good Copenhagen games where I was the highest rated player, I guess, but we then again lost to Space Soldiers, I think, like a team that we shouldn't have lost to back then at all. We went on to Gfinity and actually placed second, and I and Muddy in particular had a great event. So it was not that I was underperforming or not performing well. It was just it never led to anything, and there was so many internal issues, and it just didn't feel like a team, you know. When Dignitas, they felt, as I said, like MSL was one of my best friends for quite some time. It felt that like this was a team where I had friends and where we could like really hang out and have fun, the whole team together. Where in SK we were like sort of split up in groups in the team, within the team, you know. That's really unhealthy, you know, when you have two guys going up against three and all that kind of stuff. And that was like that a lot of the time in SK gaming between some certain players. So that was just rough, you know. We were never set up to succeed, and as long as we would have the lineup that we had, we would never like go beyond anything. Like the Gfinity sort was the best we had, and that was mainly down to everyone else underperforming, I think, and us overperforming a little bit. So, you know, I didn't really like took that much credit in that, but it was nice, obviously. But yeah.
So one of the things I know frustrated you in the SK era was something that unfortunately has just become like basically, you know when they say for actors that they get like typecast, like, you know, they think, right, this is all you can do as an actor, so we'll only give you those movies. Unfortunately, this is the era when, for whatever reason, even though in SK you were still one of the biggest names, I know from talking to you, you didn't get to play your roles, and they didn't give you the chance to be the best player, you know. It was kind of like you joined the team, and it's like, well, this is our team, and you're going to have to do these things here, and there's no easy way to put it. You were kind of put into the bad roles, right? The stuff that no one wants to do. And to some degree, I mean, hasn't that kind of followed you to Team Liquid? That's just kind of who you've had to be for the last year or so, right?
Yeah. I wouldn't say it was that bad in SK. It was, and I guess it's more down to like I was joining a team that always like was a team. You know, they've been playing together for at least 3 months with Magic's Boy. I think 2 months or something. So they had their roles, they had their spots. So they were okay, nice in the beginning to like feed me the spots that I wanted, or at least trying to. It was not always possible. But it more like I got my spots, but I didn't get to play them as I did in Dignitas. It's more like that, I'd say. It was a different type of way we played, and I was simply not getting the space that I felt I needed to perform that well. And that period was again very rough for me. And I started to, as I said, like that was one of the first time I started to really feel, is this right for me? Like, do I even want to be a player? And I sort of, I'd say, got careless in the sense that, okay, if me like sucking it up and especially because now we talked about the Dignitas period where I was not acting maturely enough and not acting like a nice teammate, you know, I really felt that, okay, this is what I need to be. If I need to be a nice guy in SK and give up some of the stuff that I actually, you know, and it sounds stupid now, but that's like what you feel, you know. There's stuff that I know would have made us better in SK, and I know I would personally perform better, and which would have made our team perform better. But I just let it be, you know, and I just sucked it up, and like, because I was afraid of like carrying on that like bad reputation, you know. That's something that really it hurted me, because whatever you want to believe it or not, that's not the type of person I am. It's just I want to win for every price it takes, but that really got to me. That like messed with my mind, you know. I'd rather be the nice guy than actually saying what I mean in a lot of situations, and that slowly killed my like inner fire, and that slowly like made me be a player that was sucking up more bad roles than I probably should have. So it's like a combination of like the Dignitas stuff still haunting me, I guess.
So as I said, in that team you did play with Magic's Boy, Megis, however you want to say it, and at that time, okay, yeah, he had. I remember it was just before you joined. Actually, was when he had that Fragmite Masters where he had like the one crazy game on Overpass, and everyone was like, "Oh, he's going to be the next talent." But actually, it looked like for a while, like, nah, that was just one game. Actually, you know, it wasn't until actually after your time when you'd left the team when he became a lot better. It was like EliGE, and then he came in at Dignitas, obviously, and then. What's weird is then it's like he went 0 to 60, then he became super good overnight, and then now it feels like he's dropped back a little bit. After playing with him, after seeing him in other teams, what do you actually make of him as a player? Because he confuses me. I can't tell. Like, I really thought when they went Epicenter, this guy's going to be like, you know, top 5 player in the world. He's going to be so good. And then, I don't know, he's still good, but I'm not sure what to make of him. What's your take as someone who played with him and has seen him since?
Yeah, he had like same learning curve as Kjaerbye. I feel like it's similar. Not as long as Kjaerbye. Like Kjaerbye did take a long time, but Magic's Boy was not like that crazy with us in the beginning. He was very, very good online. Like it was our best player online for sure. But at the events, I think if you look up the stats, like he was never really outperforming me and Muddy. I think me and Muddy were the two consistent guys going to events. He had some decent ones, but like he first really showed potential at LAN at Gfinity. You know, that's his first event where me, Muddy, and Magic's Boy were playing really well, and that was like the first event where he actually like were playing really, really well. And then we went to ELEAGE together as well, where he, as you said, like he started playing really, really well back then. And that's I left the team after ELEAGE, but he didn't know about that during ELEAGE. So he was like, that was his first event where you thought like, okay, this is the Magic's we see online. Why doesn't he do that every time? And then I, as you said, left the team, and you started to see more of that from him. Like he was consistently, I think, like one of the best players for what became were the Dignitas back then? Yeah, Dignitas, right? Yeah. So yeah, it started slow, but he got it. I think as a person, he was very young as well. Like I can see a lot of what he did in myself when I was like 17 years old, you know, because he's young still. He was not always nice to be a teammate with, not always. He was like, I hate the word toxic, but he was sometimes whining a lot, you know. But again, looking back at it, it's natural for a guy in that age, you know. He got into the scene very quick. He only had one real team, I think, before joining SK, which wasn't a great team back then, but still like a top 20 team in the world, I guess. So that's quite a big jump to make. So I guess you couldn't expect anything else from him, you know. But he was not always as pleasant to be a teammate with, and it certainly didn't help that he had like Freeze, for an example. He was not always nice to him. In some ways, like I even remember after the major qualifier at zews, I think he was like out publicly on Twitter, like sort of like blaming Magic's Boy for something. At least we intentionally knew what he meant, and just like that's something that can kill a young guy, you know. So I think he felt that he was not like in a great environment to learn and be great. So I think that's why it took him some time to like make up the performances that he did at ELEAGE, you know. It just took one event where he like really felt it, and then it got him going, you know, because that's where you move on, or you move over the past where like if before Freeze, this old like legend like tells you that you are a shithole, you know, or like blames you sort of intentionally on Twitter after a big loss, you know, that gets to you. But when you put up an event like ELEAGE, like stuff like that will fade away, you know, because where were you when I did that? You know, that's the mindset you get as a competitive player. Might sound rough, but that's how it is. So I think it just took him like one good event, and then he went off. Now I don't know, because I said I left after ELEAGE, so I don't know how he carried on. I think he's still learning. Like he's still learning to be a better teammate, and I think from what I know and what I've heard and what I've spoken to them, he's learning fast, you know. So I think he's a great teammate now, and he's gonna be one of the stars. Like his aim is insane, and he puts in a lot of work in it as well. Like he loves playing games, and he loves sitting in front of the computer. So when you have that fire going for you, and you have the talent that he has, it's gonna be great no matter what. Why he struggles right now, or why he struggles a little bit, I don't even know if he struggles. It's like he's just not as good as he was before. Yeah. Still good. I don't know. Like I think every player will have those sort of periods, you know, if you're not coach zero. I at least think personally that he'll get back to it. Might have something to do with Aizy coming on the team. You know, it's hard fitting in config Aizy and Magic's Boy, I could imagine. Cajun as well. Like who are you gonna like? MSL is obviously a support guy, but who's going to be the second guy like playing the support roles? Because there's always got to be some second guy. You can't really ask for either Aizy, Cajun, or anyone to do that. So that might have hurted him a little bit, or given him a little less space. But I also feel like he's a guy that can still play well with less space, just because he's so insanely good and like fired up. Like he really wants to be good, you know. That's like where a lot of the anger and whining comes from as well. Like because it's somehow nice, because you can really feel on him that he wants it that bad, you know. So sometimes you don't really care when like he says some stupid stuff or something like that. Like stuff that I myself like have been very good at, you know. I can see a lot of myself in him sometimes.
So after that, I mean, if people hear about the way like SK was going, like there was problems. I mean, at the time, obviously the organization was going to end up kicking the team anyway, because they got the best team in the world basically. So fair play to them. But around this time, a lot of people on the outside would not have said there's much chance for Pimp to go to a good team at this point in time. But luckily, your old mate Thorin knew a few people in NA, and he heard some stories from you about maybe, you could be bought out, and maybe it wasn't too high, and it just so happened that Team Liquid obviously had that really weird scenario where they'd had Simple, they'd had a really great result, but they knew they had to get someone. And at that time, it even made sense for Team Liquid because, buyouts had gotten really crazy in CS. And at the time, if you remember, almost no Europeans want to move to NA, unless it's a much better scenario. So you were one of the only people where the buyout's reasonable. You're in a situation where you can't get into a better European team, and actually Team Liquid's a better chance to do something. So what were your actual thoughts going into the team? Because while it was like an opportunity, it also came with an obvious pressure, which is that even though on paper you're replacing Simple, like no one's replacing Simple, and obviously in that team you weren't taking Simple's role, definitely. So what did you think of that opportunity? It had to be. Was it daunting at all to go over to Team Liquid and to go to America and have to live there and play in a totally different team?
Yeah, it's like, I'd say it's the biggest decisions I've ever made, like life-wise. I've had it, like I had, like outside of CS, like turbulent period and all that kind of stuff. Like my life outside of CS was like the best ever, So it at least from my like personal perspective, it takes a toll on you because I was like really loving life besides when I played CS because it was that rough, Not saying I didn't like to play CS, but CS just didn't give me the same satisfaction or on the same level that when I played in Dignitas for that matter. Outside of CS, my life was perfect, really perfect, I felt. So giving that up was rough, and I guess it tells you, at least tells me how much it meant for me because I really, really, really wanted to get back on Dignitas level, on Western Wolves level. I wanted to be one of the best players and one of the best teams. Still want to, So I felt that was like, sure, I have a nice life now, and I really love my friends, and I have like the best friend group you could ever wish for, and I have some lovely family as well. But I felt it was like a needed step in order to progress in my career. It was either doing that or like giving up. And I definitely didn't feel for giving up. So just as hard as it was and just as much time I used to think about it, I was like never really in doubt, that I wanted to do this because I felt it was like a sort of like a make it or break it situation, which it's not a break it situation, but it was just like it felt back then there was either like do this or give up, So I went on doing it, and I to this day have no regrets doing it at all. It just unfortunately didn't work out.
So even though you guys, like one of the problems with the NA teams at the moment, and it plagues almost everyone except Cloud9, because Cloud9 obviously gets invited to every event, but one of the worst things about being in a top NA team is that sometimes you don't even get to go to the LAN, because those NA qualifiers, to me, that's like trying to fly through in like a tiny little aeroplane. And that there's that famous thing where if just some birds come by randomly, they just go in the engines and the plane crashes, right? That's what it's like trying to go through those online qualifiers, Teams that aren't even teams, like mixed teams, can take top NA teams down and suddenly you don't get to go to the LAN. So we didn't see you for a while. The first event was this ESL New York event, So you went there. And with it being like Swiss system, and there were a lot of good teams there, like, people forget the teams that did badly was like Astralis, G2, there was good teams there. To finish top 4, that was a pretty good first event. What did you think? What did you make of the team at the time, that you could come out the gate and actually have a strong finish?
That's fun because when I got over to Team Liquid, like we started out horribly. Like we were like so bad, and I was coming in after they made their major performance, so all of the other guys were obviously high on that, and they were thinking, okay, like we're one of the best teams in the world, so this NA shit is going to be easy, and like it never really was for us. I don't know what happened or what went wrong, but I didn't feel like I had any say or like there was anything I could do about it. It was like the other guys, without blaming them, it's just like they weren't performing up to what they just did at the major, for some reason. So yeah, we started that horrible. Online CS in ESL Pro League, we lost to teams that we shouldn't lose to. We lost matches then, like leading 14-3 and still end up losing. We missed EliGE Season 2, losing to
Echo Fox and Shazam
in a stupid game. We were leading big time and still ended up losing. There were so many internal issues, so many things going on. It was just like it was so rough, and it's funny to think about because I didn't personally feel like it was as rough as it actually was, because I still had like a very positive mindset. I still believed that, okay, whatever, start difficulties, we're going to get over them and we're going to like start owning at some point. And that line of thought I kept to myself for almost my entire Liquid period. And it was like mainly when I started losing that, believing in that we can actually turn this around, that I also figured out, this is not right for me. So I had that for quite some time. And ESL New York actually only like confirmed me that I felt like, okay, I'm right, because we went into the event with a bootcamp where we did horrible. We drawed CLD, who back then were like shit team, honestly, or at least it felt like that. It should be like that, but they were not a good team. But we still draw them. They were not even playing well against other NA teams. We had a bootcamp where the practice didn't go that well. It was like either we won big time or we lost big time. There was no consistency, no nothing. Basically, we were having we actually had Nitro as a caller. Like we changed the caller the day of the bootcamp. I think it was like such a messy period, But we still went into New York and we did well. So we won. Who did we win against? We won against G2, I think, and we started out losing to Navi, and then we won against Fnatic twice. Yeah, Fnatic arguably wasn't that strong back then, but it's still like a decent result against a Fnatic team with still like all of my stuff. Of course, Trist was insane, and like it's a decent team, but not like Fnatic as in now. So that was great, and then we went into the semifinal against Navi. Another game I feel that we could have won. We probably shouldn't, but we could have won. We won the first map big time, Cobblestone, and we were like we actually believed in, okay, this is our event. They're having, the other guys were like having another major run. We go. And when we went to train, I think it was like a 13-13 game, and then they ended up winning like the last 3 rounds, and all of them were like close rounds. Obviously in Dust 2 we got blown out. Almost made a little comeback, but then fucked it up again. So it was like a game we could have won, and then like making a final at ESL New York, the first event with me, and after such a shitty period, that tells you something. At least it told me like, okay, this can be good, But then we just went home and we started like being even worse for some reason. Like it never really got into a good period. Like when I think about the last 7 months where I was in Liquid, like we never really had 2 weeks where everything just felt good, where I could go up, I could play, feel good, go to bed, repeat next day. Like I didn't have like any streak whatsoever. There was always something, Peacemaker ended up leaving the team or getting thrown out by Liquid, I guess it was. We didn't have a coach for a time. We didn't have a caller for some time. Like we tried everyone calling. It was like one guy said, okay, I'm going to call now. 2 days after, he didn't want to do it anymore. Then Hiko took over again. Then a new guy wanted to call. 2 days after, he didn't want to. Hiko took over again. Like there's no consistency and no like nothing. And coming from Europe, like, and the way we do it in Europe, and I've always been like used to having a caller. I've been used to have a Glaive or MSL, coming into a team where it was that messy was just so like different for me. It really didn't feel great, and it definitely affected the way I play, because I do need some sort of structure to perform. Like you I think it's you or somebody else who's been praising me for being a consistent player, and I feel that I am, but I'm not without like structure. Then it just goes away from me. So that was like very, very messy. New York was nice. It gave me faith, and it made me believe that, okay, we can do great things, but it only took us like a month to be even worse than we were before New York. So it was always like a roller coaster where it was like mostly going down. So we never really got up the roller coaster. It was broken somehow.
So, okay, this will sound like a weird question, but I've got a way to tie this in, okay, which is, after New York, obviously the results, like, I mean, there's no point even mentioning the results. They were bad. Like, you either didn't qualify for LANs, or you went to the LANs and then didn't get out of the groups, and, maybe you had the odd map here or there that you could win, but aside from that, the results are nothing worth talking about. But within this period, kind of like when Aizy was very good in Dignitas, EliGE suddenly became like the best player. And for my money, I mean, I think he's the best NA player. So for whatever reason, he himself was really, really doing very well in this period. I know from some of his past teammates that he's a very complicated guy, because on one hand, okay, I was always described him in contrast to Simple, right? Because it's anyone, you don't even have to be in the team to see why Simple can cause problems, because he's just such an aggressive, not even in game, just as a personality. He's got such an aggressive personality, and he doesn't have like any tact. That's what we call it in English. Like, he doesn't understand when, yeah, that guy did mess up, but you don't just tell him he's a fucking idiot. You sort of say, can you do it differently? You've got to make it, you've got to sugar it up a bit, So someone like Simple, it's very easy to see when they're a problem within a team. But for EliGE, he actually taught me that you can be a problem in a different way, which is you can be a fantastic player, but if you're someone who like doesn't want to confront a problem, or you just keep to yourself, or when things are going badly, you just kind of quiet up a bit. Yeah, that's not as bad. It's not as obviously disruptive, but it also can make it more difficult to be in a team. So what was it like to be a teammate of EliGE's?
It was both nice and bad in periods. EliGE, Jonathan is a very complicated person. Like I personally have nothing against him. I think he's an insane player. Like he understands CS, not to the same extent as Glaive, but you sort of like feels that he just knows what to do in some certain situations, all by default. You know, it's just the sixth sense that just works for him. You know, that's what makes him so good. I believe. You're right. Like he's very different from Simple. He's the exact opposite. Where Simple is very controversial, very loud. EliGE is not. He's again one of the guys. Just I'd say like an Aizy, just more extreme. You know, you really gotta drag it out of him if you want to know what he actually feels. And his way of dealing with conflicts is as you said, like is like staying quiet. You know, and that can be very disruptive for a team. I wouldn't say it's that bad with EliGE at all. There's been periods on the team where like I'd say like all of us caused problem in different ways. You know, Nitro wanting to be a caller and then not anyway. Spencer being Spencer, not performing as he should performing. Like we all have our to fight with. You know, we all like caused problems in that team. And whenever somebody did cause a problem and EliGE didn't agree, he just like cried up, you know, and you could instantly tell him when you played an official game that okay, there's something wrong, there's something he doesn't like, you know, and it's terrifying. A word you can use, like it's very terrifying when you know you have this like insane star player on your team, but you can just like from the beginning of the game or like after a few rounds that okay, there's something that he's not happy about, but you can't quite tell what. You don't really know what it is, you know. It just plants into the team, and that's obviously nothing he does on purpose at all. It's just like his way of dealing with stuff like that. It's like a personal characteristic, I guess. But it can be very disruptive, as you said. Something he's working on, I know it's something he's aware of. I think he even like made a tweet about it at some point, and that's like big for him, I believe. And I personally have experienced him like grow a lot the last 7 months I've been in Liquid. So I'm sure he's on the right path. And he's still very young. I think is he 19 years old, maybe.
It's pretty young, yeah.
Yeah. Like he's gonna get there. It's again like it's expected from some persons just to be different, you know, and you deal with stuff differently. I dealt with stuff when I was like I dealt with stuff being very loud and being very like I said what I meant, and if you didn't agree with it or if you didn't listen or if you didn't want to listen, I told you to fuck off, Akti. Like that's the attitude sort of I had, you know, not as extreme as it might sound, but where he just quiets down, you know, he doesn't want to talk, like he just quits talking, you know, if that's what he feels. That's just two different ways of reacting to stuff that you don't like, and that's like a personal thing, you know, a personal thing he's probably gonna get over, and I know he's working on it, so that's good for him. And as you said, like he's to me the best NA player as well. There's no doubt about it. Like he's putting up insane numbers, insane performances, even in a period where we did horrible and where we had no structure or we had nowhere to go. Basically, he still put up like great numbers, you know. So that tells quite a lot.
So you mentioned that at least in the early period when you were there, Peacemaker was the coach of Team Liquid, and he's someone where, okay, if someone just happens to have a falling out or a disagreement and then it looks really bad from the outside, but they go on and, you know, nothing else happens in the rest of their lives or their career, you could sometimes say maybe it was the other person. Maybe the circumstances were just bad. But the problem for Peacemaker is his reputation at the moment is he joins a team, you know, maybe it goes well, maybe it doesn't. A few months later, he leaves the team, he's kicked, whatever. He goes to another team, he joins it. And the problem is, it's just been that over and over again. And so it's like a manager at a football team that's at a different football team every single year. You know, eventually you got to say there's some sort of flaw coming from within that person as well as the circumstances, you know. What can you tell me about Peacemaker when he was the coach of Team Liquid? Like what do you think the issues were? Like, why couldn't he just remain as the coach? Because obviously, before the Valve coaching rule, I mean, he was in-game leading them to the final of the major, so something must have been good at one point in time.
Yeah, it's rough for me, sorry. It's rough for me to say what he did well when I was not there. Like, at the major, I don't know what he did or what he did not do, or like I don't know what made them win that major. You know, I to this date I still wonder, like, nothing against the boys, but I still wonder, like, how can we be so bad for 7 months when you almost won a major or when you made the finals of a major? You know, it didn't make any sense to me. I still this day don't know what the hell happened. You know, I came to a point now. I've come to a point now where I feel like, what happened at a major? Like, were everyone else just so bad, or were you just like completely different players? Because I didn't see like a major winning potential at any time in our team, and I didn't believe at all that's like all down to Simple. Simple did a lot of work at the major, but the other guys were playing well. Like EliGE were playing well. JDM was having a nice event. Nitro had some huge round, and so did Spencer, Hiko. But I never saw that potential. I don't know. It's just weird. So I don't know what Peacemaker did, but I know what he did when I was on the team, and I was not a fan, to say the least. It was. I don't want to speak too bad about Peacemaker. Like, me and Lewis is okay now, I guess. We've been all the time, but we had a fair amount of disagreements. Again, I was not like pointing out all the stuff that I was unhappy about, because I, new guy on the team, felt that I had to like come in decently with a gentle hand and just like feel it out, and I did that for quite some time. But as we never won anything, and we never did well in the first like month. So I was like, after a month, okay, maybe it's time now that you actually start like saying what you mean, and like use some of your experience to maybe make this team better, where I was sort of afraid or like waiting a little bit with it before. Some again, like we had a specific thing with on the team where like some players meant one thing, were on like Peacemaker side, and 3 other guys were like feeling something different, and it started to like split up the team, and that's, again, it's so dangerous when that happens, because it's just like it sits in the team. You know when your teammates is not all on board on the same page, that's not good. You, at least that's how I feel, because I've been used to it, having Glaive and MSL on our team, where we all were like sort of on board during the whole time. Where Liquid, it felt like we were not agreeing on how to play and what to do to win, and I fairly want to say from my side, like we tried Peacemaker system in the beginning. It didn't work. Maybe it would have with more time. I don't know. That's not for me to say. But we tried it, and it didn't work. So some players wanted something new, and I was one of them. And it never, like, he never really embraced the fact that others, like, he never really embraced others' opinion that well. He was trying his best, I'm sure, and he's like, again, he was trying his best. He was just not great dealing with it. So when the other players or persons had opinion on how to play or how to do, he was like having some sort of attitude where it's like it's either my way or it's not gonna work. I don't believe in what you say, I believe in what I say, which again can be hell a good thing if it works. And it must have done at the major. So all the respect to him for doing that at the major. But when the players started losing the trust in what he praised for, then it became dangerous, and he was never really able to adapt into to like his players, I guess. So that's probably a learning experience from him, and I'm sure if you talk to him now, he would agree with that. Again, that's not because he's a bad person or a bad guy at all. It just didn't work between the players. Like, the work environment was not right for him. What in particular happened for him to leave or get removed from the team, I can't comment on. That's something between him and Liquid, not us. We probably would have stuck would lose Peacemaker for quite some time, and potentially he could have turned it all around, but it ended before it was supposed to.
Okay. So you went from Peacemaker to another Brazilian coach, because you managed to get Zeus, who obviously decided to stop being a player. I mean, I think we can all agree that wasn't such a great idea in practice, He decided to become a coach again. But, I mean, understandably, that's a move that had hype around it, because obviously he was the coach of a team that won 2 majors, In fact, actually, it's just a piece of trivia, but they haven't won a tournament since he was their coach. What is Zeus? What was he actually like as a coach? Like, what's his approach? How would you describe how he thinks about the game?
He thinks as I think. Like, he thinks like I like to use the reference saying that he thinks like a European. He understands the game. Like, he really do. Like, it was a relief getting him in. Like, not having a coach was hard for us. Having Peacemaker not working that well for us was hard for us. But when we got him, that's where I felt like, okay, now we turn it around. Like, I've said that like countless of times to myself. I said it after New York, it didn't work out. Said it after ESL Brazil, Sao Paulo it was, didn't work out. When we got in Zeus, like, I really felt this is going to be a turnaround, because he really put some color to our team, and he really, like, he told us something that nobody else dared to tell, and he like made it very clear that we was doing so many things bad, which we obviously were, because we were losing. So he was a great guy getting in, and like, my personal relationship to Zeus is fine. Like, we're good pals, I guess, pals or whatever it's called. But I really do respect him as a coach and as a human being, because he's that good. He's by far the best coach or the best guy outside of Glaive. Like, he's the guy I listened to the most. Like, whenever he said something, I knew there was like I knew there was something with it. I necessarily not always agreed with what he said, but I knew when he said something, he meant it, and he meant it for a reason. Where you had that feeling with guys that are actually like into the stuff, where I've played with other players or had other coaches where they said something and you were like, yeah, but you don't really know what you're talking about. Can you just shut up? Where you always like knew, even though you didn't agree with zews, like he knew what he talked about. He had a reason to say what he did. He didn't just like say something just to say something or to like seem relevant. He only said something when it was needed or when you made a mistake or when you fucked up. So that's like a guy that Liquid should be very, very happy they were able to get, and that's a guy that is gonna bring. You can quote me for this. That's a guy that at some point is gonna bring some big to Liquid. It doesn't have to be with this lineup, even though I think there's potential now with Twist for sure. But if he stays in Liquid, he's gonna bring them on a top level because he's that good. He's just he gets the game. He learned a lot, obviously, from being SK's coach. He knows what it takes to win, and if he can like implement that in Liquid, it doesn't really matter who you have in Liquid, as long as it's like decent players. He's gonna make them win at some point. From my point of view, it's just like it was too late. He came in. Like I've experienced that much in Liquid and had too many problems in Liquid that him coming in and him like giving him a half a year to work with us, that's just time I couldn't give him, at the time being, which I'm sorry for, but I think it's going to work out either way for Team Liquid.
A player during your time in Team Liquid that was kind of a mystery was JDM, because people thought to themselves that the reason he underperformed initially when he joined the team, because obviously he had huge potential from when he was in CLG, he was like a star AWPer. People thought, right, well, what happened was Simple was just too dominant a personality. He was AWPing, and so when Simple goes, right now it's JDM time to kind of shine and be very good. But for whatever reason, he has just struggled during the whole time he's been in Team Liquid. Like, he's never been that player from CLG that we all remember, the guy with just the best player, a really good AWPer. Now, obviously, you've been in a bunch of teams with players who used to be very good AWPers who've had their struggles, with Nico again, with Freeze in SK. Do you have kind of a sense for what the issue is with JDM? Like, why isn't he the JDM from CLG?
I honestly don't have a sense for it. That's maybe why I'm not a good AWPer, because I never like really understood why Nico got better. I never really like understand or have understood why Freeze is like that less good than he was in 1.6. And I honestly don't know what like happened, if anything happened to JDM. Like I don't know what it is that like sometimes just bring them out of the A game. It's like, I think, I don't know, like obviously there's like parts where you could say, okay, he probably gets a lot less space, in CLG, for sure. Like he's not like catered to as much, but like we even tried in Liquid at a lot of times, like cater to him more. And I feel like we gave him a lot of freedom. We give him a lot of freedom, but it might not be the type of AWPer he is. He might not like, freedom might not be enough for him. You might like have to dedicate some guy to him, dedicate a guy where he helps him out, and then he all of a sudden shines up as this like insane AWPer that he is. I've seen stuff in practice and I've seen stuff in matches where like the stuff that he can do sometimes tells me that he's a very, very good player. He just doesn't do it often enough. Why that is, I like that's something again, like I can break down my head and I can think about it, but I'll never need to know. I don't understand it. I feel like we tried a lot, and I think it's gotten better for sure. I think it's a thing in his head right now. Maybe, I don't know. Like he just need one positive event thing, for him to get going again. Because I've seen what he can do, like in practice. I've seen what he can do in like specific matches. But it has to be more consistent. What it is, I honestly don't know. I feel like we in Liquid, at least when I was there, we tried a lot to like bring that out of him, but it never really succeeded to the extent that we wanted.
So the player who struggled the most in your era was my old mate Hiko, and people always get mad that I don't just wreck him, But one of the reasons why I don't is because knowing some of the behind the scenes stuff, I know, for example, like you said in your answer earlier, he never wanted to be the in-game leader, but if everyone else keeps giving up the role, someone has to do it, and especially because he used the logic of, well, since I'm playing badly myself anyway, if I can maybe just be the leader, maybe that's a way to sort of turn it around. And obviously, he wasn't a good leader, and he was in a bad form in terms of individually. Like, you never got to play with the good Hiko, obviously. How would you describe during the time he was in Team Liquid?
Yeah, good question. Like as you said, I never really got to play with the good Hiko. I've seen glimpses of like what he can do, but also only glimpses, and it wasn't that often. I think it comes down to that's not bashing Hiko. Like, he's been around for a long time. I first of all respect him for like putting up with a lot of the bullshit that we as a team have put him through. I guess like removing him as a caller, putting him back, removing him, putting him back. You know, it never felt like that's something he wanted to do, but something he had to do, as you said. You know, so you gotta respect somebody for sacrificing like that. You know. Sort of like similar to me playing the roles I did in EliGE, you know, never really something I wanted to do, but that's what I was asked to do, you know. So I respect that personally a lot because I know the feeling. But he was not playing well. Like he was really underperforming, and what like haunts me the most maybe, and what's like what made me lose some sort of respect, I guess, in that sense, and not feel sorry for him, is that he never really put in the work to turn it around. You know, I can, like JDM for example, like we just talked about him, like he hasn't been performing that well, but I've seen him put in tons of work in order to fix it. You know, I've seen him try a lot of stuff, and he's willing to try, he's willing to listen. Whereas with Hiko, it feels like he doesn't have the same fire as in terms of like playing more or trying harder or like turning the tables around, you know. And that's something I personally value a lot when people are willing to do that, and it didn't seem like Spencer was feeling doing that, you know. So respect to him for trying, of putting up with the bullshit we put him through. And then again, like if he never really like tried hard enough, according to me, I guess maybe it has something to do with him being like an older player, and like sometimes they don't need to play as much. But like when you perform like Spencer did for so long, like I kind of would like to see a reaction that is like, okay, now I pull myself up and now I'm gonna like work hard the next month, see if it works, and if not, then you know, try something else. But I never like got the sense that he was trying hard to turn it around, you know. And that's frustrating, to be honest.
So as you kind of alluded to earlier, like obviously Team EliGE has a new lineup now. You're not part of it, but you're still on the contract. And the circumstances surrounding that are very weird, because it's one of those scenarios where behind the scenes there are a lot of moves that don't happen with teams. You know, like a player wants to go here, or a player says he will, or but they can't work out the contract. I mean, funnily enough, I remember that happened to Tarek. He was going to try and join Team EliGE or CLG, or you know, but he obviously ended up on Optic. But this is one of the rare cases where I've seen where it got out into the public. Actually, like it was reported that Rush and Mixwell from Optic, where obviously Optic were having their own problems, were going to leave. They were going to join Team EliGE. You were going to be one of the players that got replaced. Now that didn't happen. Instead, both those players are still in Optic, and instead, Team EliGE, you know, obviously didn't recruit the two players. So, one, why is Pimp not in Team EliGE now? And then two, what do you think of that the way that was all going to go down, and kind of like that, what could have been, and then what now happened with the roster?
Yeah. First of all, Pimp is not in Team EliGE anymore because I don't feel it's a place I want to be. I feel like my 7 months in EliGE have been very, like, again, a great learning experience. Sounds cliche to say it that much, but it really has. It's been first of all, like a huge experience living in LA, living abroad, you know, living so far away from everything you love and like. That's big. But I don't feel it's a place I want to be anymore. I don't feel I can do more in EliGE. And I honestly, I've given up on EliGE in that sense. And that sounds rough to say, but I really, really, really feel, and I'm sure if you talk to some of the guys, if you talk to my manager Steve, like I've been talking to a lot, like he's been like a very good friend when I was over there. Like I've shared a lot of thoughts with him. Like if you talk to some of the guys, they know I've tried everything basically. I really put in a lot of hours. I was playing more than I ever did, and I was having this constant like feeling of, okay, we're gonna turn it around, like, okay, give it another 2 weeks and we're gonna turn it around. And I feel I was constantly let down by something or someone, or I don't know, you know, I was just let down, you know. I never felt that the positive vibes I kept, you know, or the feeling that like, yeah, I don't know, it just never gave any reward, you know. And then living so far away from your friends, family, living like basically sacrificing everything, also sacrificing me as a player, you know, because I did play a full-time support role basically in Team EliGE. When zews come along, he asked me basically to become a full-time like dedicated support player, you know. Couldn't be more support as I were. Lost like my spots over the last 7 months I've played. I don't think I have any of the spots I had in the beginning when I joined Team EliGE. I've been moved around all the time because somebody else wanted to play where I played, or somebody else wasn't happy about their spot, so I took over. And it was like, I felt like a chess brick being moved around, and just in order to, you know, eventually get sacrificed, you know. So it didn't feel right, and I didn't feel that I was suited for the job anymore. I played according to myself, and I believe that I played well in Liquid. Considering my role, I put out great numbers. I've only had like 2 events overall where I've had minus rating, I think, or above or below 1 rating, and that's, to me, that's satisfying, knowing that it actually paid off individually. It hurts me a lot that it didn't pay off on our team, and we didn't really get to win anything or get to do well besides ESL New York. That haunts me, and that's simply why I'm not there anymore. It's I don't feel being this chess brick anymore, and I feel like it's time for me to get home, settle down, and become the player I once were. Now put in everything if possible.
So a theme that has run throughout the interview is, even when there's been good times, hard times have come afterwards. And in some of those hard times, like I've known a lot of CS players, do quit when things go badly, or when they don't think, like, it's when they can't see how they could get back to the top again. Like, which team would I join, or what would my route be? That's when a lot of them just say, right, I'm just done now, Like, you've constantly given the story that you never gave up and you always kept going, and you were going to, for example, you even played when you made almost no money in 2014 and it looked like there was no chance again. So at the moment, you're still under contract with Team Liquid, but the future is that Pimp will play again in a pro team.
For sure. Like, it's not up to me. I guess I could join some lower tier team, I guess. Suck it up, make no money. Not really a possibility right now, because I've built up, a life where I have expenses and I need to make some sort of money, So everything has a balance, but I could join, and I'm willing to join a less good team. I'm willing to start from the bottom. I'm still to work my way up again. I'm not done, and there's not really much more to say. It's not up to me though. It's like, if people want me, they can come and we can talk. But if nobody wants me, I gotta make them want me. It's up to me if that's not happening by itself.
Okay. Do you have a final message at the end of the interview? Someone you want to thank?
Not really. Like, message being that anyone watching this, oh, it's been, first of all, interesting. It's always interesting talking to you, and yeah, knowing that to my fans and to whoever might concern about me, like I'm not done. It might take some time. It might take a month or 2 before I actually figure something out. It's not up to me. Something could change tomorrow. CS is a wild game, But just know that I'm not done, and know that I'm coming back for you.
Tusind tak.
You're welcome.
I'm Device from Astralis, and welcome to Foreign's YouTube channel. It's a joke-free zone.